initial conversation will be targeted towards founders. And obviously the state of technology industry today is going through a correction. It's going through a shift, recalibration, a reset. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Let's start with you, Brad.
Each of them was a financial reset, not a tech reset. They were a financial reset. And the reason I say that is because the secular curve, anybody in Silicon Valley in 2001 knew the internet was going to change everything. But the financial markets were struggling. Anybody in Silicon Valley in 2008, 2009 knew that this iPhone was going to change everything, that cloud computing was going to, that secular curve was as steep as ever. But we had a financial market reset, and that's what we're going through again today. I actually get excited during these resets because what it does is it makes our job easier. During periods of excess liquidity, free money, two bad things happen. Number one, we fund too many companies because capital races in. And we tend to compete away the natural profits that start us. I think you have to shut that off, she said, when we're talking. You compete away the natural profits. So, for example, in ride sharing, Bill Gurley talked about capital as a weapon of economic destruction. So the first mover doesn't get first mover advantages because you have 10 people who get funded to follow, and they all destroy the economics of the industry for a decade. And so it makes the founder's job a lot harder. So this period of scarcity, I think, is really healthy for both venture capitalists, but also for founders. Because the founders who are really willing to grind it out, the founders who are the most like, the Travises and the Elons of the world that are going to grind it out for that decade, that aren't looking to get rich quick, that are going to build things that matter in the world, that move humanity forward. Those are the founders who don't go away in 2009 and 2010. They didn't disappear in 2001. I mean, Elon founded these companies in the wake of the financial reset in 2000, 2001. So I get excited because I know when I see founders in the wake of a financial reset, they're the ones who are really, they're in it to win it. They're going to grind it out. So I would end on this and then pass the ball to Jacob. There's no lack of enthusiasm in Silicon Valley. I tweeted a couple weeks ago, at the end of 2022, I think there were over 1,000 unicorns in the world. And I said 100% of them will do a down round. So 1,000 out of 1,000 companies will be priced down. And I got a lot of feedback, oh my gosh, what is the end of times? And I said, well, why is that so unusual? The stock market, every single tech company in the stock market went down. So why wouldn't every company valued over $1 billion go down? And the worst part is that 500 to 600 of those companies weren't great companies to begin with and should have never been valued there. So they'll probably do a down round and may never get back to prior peaks. But a couple hundred of those will do their normal down 30 or 40% just because the cost of money has gone from 0 to 5%. And when that happens, they'll go on to higher highs to build bigger things. So don't let that, as a founder, slow you down. In fact, you should be enthusiastic in this moment. It may be a little bit harder. When I raised money, I did my first trade, we're public and a VC, for November 1st, 2008. There wasn't a soul on the planet who wanted to start an investing firm on November 1st, 2008, but it was great because I had no competitors. So I think for founders, this is the best of time, not the worst.
During these times that can actually make it through. Like what is the soul of that founder? What does a founder do and behave like during these difficult times?
Yeah, I think what we lived through at the peak there was a bit of a delusion. And one of the magical things about Silicon Valley is that it's a milestone-based funding system. And so you get friends and family who give you money. It makes it very difficult to go home for the holidays if you lose them. Right? And then you go to an accelerator perhaps. And then you raise a seed round, 25,000, 50,000, 100,000 at a time. And each step along the way, you have to prove something. And what happened during this peak was people became so good, and it's partially my fault with the podcasts, teaching people how to pitch and teaching people how service work, that people became better at pitching investors than selling customers and building products. At the end of the day, what we do as founders is we build products that delight customers, that solve a problem for them. There's only 3 things that matter. I'm training a bunch of young investors at my firm. Team, product, customers. Everything else is not important. But during peaks, that's when people get distracted. They raise too much money, they start doing 5 projects, and then the founders start creating funds, and they're investing on the side, and well, wait a second, you were a founder. No, I've also got my own fund. It just got crazy. So to answer your question, focus. Relentless focus. When you don't know what to do as a founder, when you're scared, when you're staying up at night, when you're panicking, when you've got 3 months of runway, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, and you have that pit of your stomach, and you feel sick, and you can't sleep, and you're staring at the ceiling. That's when you go talk to your customers. That's when you get your team together over the weekend and say, I talked to our customers, let's build this feature and let's test it. So that's what I look for in founders. I want people who are obsessed about the product and the customers and have what we call internally product velocity. That's how we make our decisions to pick the founders. We meet with them, and then maybe 4 or 5 weeks into the process, we meet with them again and we look at the product. We don't tell them we're doing it, but we look at what's changed in the product. We go look at the App Store and see if they updated their app. One company updated it twice, one didn't update it. So it really is about whoever can move at and have that product velocity, small teams, and filled with builders. Not just idea people. People come to me all the time and want to talk about ideas, and they say, oh, I got so many millions of ideas. And it's like, oh yeah, I did too last night. I had a dream. Every night we all dream and have 100 ideas. It means nothing. Your ideas mean nothing. Your execution is the only thing that matters.
I'm gonna later that.
I will take a whole round. Just convince Travis and Garrett to not create a marketplace. Have them make software and sell it to cab companies. And I looked at the person and I was like, this person is incredibly successful and so stupid. Like, the cab companies are the problem in this. We have to remove the cab companies and then lower the prices and make it more accessible. And I said to them, because that was coming up in my career, I didn't want to sell them. I said, well, that's a good idea. Yeah, I'll totally talk to Travis. And then I thought about it. I'm never going to tell Travis this because it's so embarrassing for this person. And so over time, I stopped worrying about my ability to understand the customers and the product. My job is to support the founder and to look for that product velocity, look for incredible product design, and an obsession to every little detail. I had one of the early Teslas, and I was driving with Elon in the car, and we were on the highway, and it was making a whistling noise. And I kid you not, he started raising the window up and down on the Model X, pushing the glass, and then he said, just pull over here. And I was going to my house. I pulled over, got out, took a picture of it, and was getting on the phone. Like, he was literally in the car doing product stuff about this gap in the window. And
That's the obsession.
yeah, and if you don't have that, what it means to you as a founder is that either you're not cut out to be a founder, you should quit, or you haven't found the right idea that you're passionate enough about. But if you don't bring that level of passion, that should tell you you're doing the wrong idea.
Yeah.
Move on to the next idea, or you should go find somebody who has that level of obsession, work for them, and just be incredibly skilled at helping them realize a dream. Or you could work, I don't know what the equivalent of the postal service here is, but you can work with the post office or something, or at Starbucks, where you don't need to have that obsession. Right?
Yeah.
But it requires unbelievable sacrifice, your sanity, your relationships. You have to be willing to sacrifice. It is a dogged competition. Lest you think everybody's going to succeed, I can tell you 80 or 90% of you who start companies will fail, and it will be brutal, and you will feel sick in your stomach. And all you have to do is get up and do it 3 or 4 times and you will be successful. But be prepared, because Uber was Travis's 3rd company. He got sued for $250 billion in the first one. Scour. He created Napster, but from movies. He got sued for $250 billion by the movie industry, when he was 22. Then he did Red Swoosh, which was like a CDN, but he was too early and he sold it, and it was like a $20 million sell. And then he did Uber. You have to be prepared for pain and suffering and obsession and sacrifice. And what happened for the last 5 years was there were a group of people who were playing the role of founder. They wanted all of the accoutrement. They wanted to be famous. They wanted to say they were a founder. They wanted to have the pitch deck. They wanted to raise the money. They wanted to watch their valuation go up. But they were actors.
Yeah.
And now it's time for the real deal. Because if you want to raise money now, you better have a great product. The benchmark has gone up 10x, 100x to get 10% of the valuation.
Let's talk a little bit about the sort of pivot and change. And I remember a year ago, I was here speaking to a couple of people, and we took a point of view that Facebook, or Meta, was finished. The company is over. It's lost its game. It's lost its leadership. And for you, Brad, tell us the story. You wrote this letter to the CEO, to Mark Zuckerberg. And it was contrarian at the time. He said, "Hey, you need to start doing 1, 2, 3, 4." And it looks like he listened. Either he listened or he was planning on it. And things have changed. But tell us a little bit about your deep belief that this is what he needed to do. And if he did that, this company was still a very, very important special company.
One of the things I love most about Silicon Valley is it's a real community. We've been there for 2 decades, and we know all of Mark's senior team, and we know Mark, and it was really around the poker table and our dinner tables where we had been having a conversation for 2 years about the downside of 0 rates and free money, the age of excess. Like, what did it lead to? And if you just looked at the raw number of employees at Google and Facebook went from 40,000 employees to 80,000 employees in 2 years. Google went from 100,000 to 190,000 employees. And everybody that we talked to said, it's slowed down, we're not releasing products, it's no fun to work there, and it showed in the numbers. And I think that there was also a lot of dislocation around the IDFA and a lot of things happening in the world that specifically were hurting Meta. And so if we telescoped out, there are 2 choices you can make as a public market investor. I had first invested in Meta, and Mark knew this, in 2012. The company had gone public. The transition, Mark had famously made his app in HTML5, and it didn't work. And investors concluded that they wouldn't be able to monetize mobile the way they monetize desktop. And the stock broke $20 a share, and the cover of Barron's was that Facebook is finished. But we knew, talking to all the people who were working there, that he's working on a native app. I knew marketers that were using it in the sandbox and how well it worked. And it just stood to reason that an infinite scroll, right, where I could entertain myself like television, was going to work better on mobile than it did on desktop. Because I get up and leave my desk, but I don't leave my supercomputer, right? It stays with me. So I wasn't a fly-by investor. I invested for a long time. We were talking about the downside of the age of excess. And so one of the downsides is you do too much, you invest too much, you hire too many people. And at Meta, that manifested itself in a 10-year project where they plan to spend more money than the US government spent on the Apollo project that put men on the moon. And nobody really even understood exactly what it was, including Mark. And yet, staring them in the face was probably the biggest gold mine, the biggest opportunity that we've seen in our investment careers, which was AI. And this was a company, I had been talking to them about 4 or 5 years because we were early investors. We had backed Yamin at ByteDance, and I remember Yamin sitting in our conference room, and I said, how are you going to build, an entertainment feed in China without a social network? And he said, Brad, AI is way more powerful than a social network. And so that was really the conversation with Mark, that the core business needed to get fit and focused, that he should double down on AI, and he should just quarantine, invest $5 billion a year, which is still an insane amount of money on metaverse instead of 15 or 20. And when I sent the letter to Mark, I had to talk. Here's the thing, he's 38 years old. He doesn't have to listen to me or talk to me or any other investor. But the brilliance of Mark Zuckerberg is he's infinitely curious. He's mentally flexible. He's in the building. Larry and Sergey are not in the building. Mark is in the building. He cares deeply about the product. And so when I took him through this alternative vision, I said, this isn't about stock price. You don't care about stock price, but what you do care about is working with the smartest people in the world on the most important things in the world to move humanity forward. And he's like, yes. And I said, this path won't get you there. Here's the path to get you there. And so I would like to think that we made a small impact. But when we discussed it on the pod or we discussed it on CNBC, I said, this is an open letter to all of us, to all of Silicon Valley. We've all become unfit. Working from home, we convinced ourselves that it was as productive as working in the office. It wasn't. Being in the office, working long nights, pizza boxes, that is how stuff really gets done. It's where the energy. So I thought that, it was important for them, but I thought it was even more important to send that message to everybody. And it was really the message that we've been discussing around the poker table. So I don't have a lot of pride of authorship around it.
You shouldn't. I think it was really good timing. It was brave of you to do, actually. I give you a lot of credit for it. Because you saw it arguably a year before I think a lot of people saw it, and you said it, a year before a lot of people were willing to say it. The truth is, great products are typically made by small teams. And when you have so much money, what people were doing was they were getting office space and employees based on 2 years out. Where do we think we're going to be in 2 years? And what happened was there were people who were just at offices saying, I'm working on nothing, but I'm getting paid so much, and this is a money printed machine. What they didn't realize was it was actually slowing them down. And they had managers managing managers. And anybody who's worked in a big organization knows when you have too many managers, it just becomes a quick way to drive out people who actually do great work, who don't need a ton of direction. Now this has led to what I think, and you didn't ask this question, but it's an actual follow-up, so sorry, as a moderator, I have to go with the next question, which is, what is
I listen to a lot of your podcasts, so a lot of this is learning from you.
The follow-up is, what impact is AI going to have? And so when we were watching this AI thing happen, I just told people at our companies, make your default homepage ChatGPT, or Bard, or from Core, whatever, whichever one you want. The sandbox or playground if you're a developer, and just make a list of everything you do every day, and try doing it in ChatGPT or one of these other services. And what we quickly found was 10, 20, 30% of everybody's job could be done in these tools already, or some approximation of them. Some people was as high as 50. So what we're going to see, I predict, in Silicon Valley is smaller teams are going to get more done. And so then you worry, oh my God, we're going to lose all the jobs in the world. Well, no. Unless you think that the number of problems that we have to solve as a species, humanity, that we're almost done with it. How many people think that we're almost done solving all the problems in our lives? Raise your hand and think we're almost done. Exactly. There's so much more left to do. So let's just assume, and I just had Brian Chesky from Airbnb, Aaron Levy from Box, and Reid Hoffman, who just started a new AI company from LinkedIn on the podcast this week in startups, in the same 3 days. I interviewed them all the same days, and I asked them the same question. What percentage are people, by the end of this year, 2023, how much more efficient are they going to be with the tools at the pace we're going? And have you ever seen the pace like this? Uniformly, they said, it depends on the position, but I think 20, 30, or 40%. All four of us have the same answer, because we're all using it every day. Now, in addition to that, people are on hiring freezes. If you're a young person who's working from home, you've never spent any time with the founders or the CEO of the company or leadership, you are in a very dangerous place right now. Because you can take your 10-person team, if you can get 30% more efficient, that means you're at a 13-person team at the end of the year. Next year, maybe you're 40% more efficient, now you have another 3 or 4 people without adding to headcount. So what's going to happen in Silicon Valley for capital allocators is what I think about, because that's my job now. We can fund companies for a much lower number. And when I started in the industry, we would raise $3 million and you'd spend 2 years, sometimes as little as a year, buying servers, racking them, putting them in a co-location facility, getting an office space, and your product would come out in month 18. Now, because of cloud computing and because of the development of software, 3 people have a product up and running, in a hackathon in a weekend and have 10 customers. That's going to go even faster. And roadmaps will get done quicker, which means the long tail of software is going to really be viable. Somebody might have a very niche product, and 3 people will get it to $25 million in revenue. We're going to start seeing companies, I will tell you right now, in the next 5 years, there will be many stories of 3 people, 1, 2, 3 really talented bionic people using ChatGPT and other technologies, and they will make 10 or 20 or $30 million, $10 million in revenue per employee. The great companies make 500 to 1.5 million right now. That's going to 10x. And that's what's got me excited about investing.
So we're gonna front load the load.
Yes, absolutely. It's the most exciting. We've been lucky enough to do this for 25 years. But let's all telescope out for a second. The history of humanity has been pretty miserable. For 99% of humanity, most humans in their lifetime did not see a single invention. The cycle time on invention was slower than the life was long. And yet, we're living through these massive, earth-shattering inventions that build on one another. And so, AI could not exist without the internet. Mobile couldn't have existed without the internet. AI could not have existed without the cloud, because these are information data gathering devices. These are why we have the data. The cloud is what makes the data frictionless. That's what runs the AI machine. In 2015, I was at a dinner with Bill Gates, and he said, and Bill's an optimist on humanity. Read his annual letters at the end of every year, the Gates annual letter, and it will really pump you up about all that we do, because it's really been entrepreneurs and invention that has moved humanity forward. Governments create the conditions to allow innovation to occur, but it's founders and funders working in that system that actually are doing the innovation. And so when I think about AI, what Gates said at that dinner is, he said, humans make decisions with limited information, right? So we gather, and for most of humanity, it was a single person's data that they held in their head and the single processing power of your brain. And you gathered it over your lifetime, and then you died, and we started all over again. Now we're collecting and maintaining all the data, all the words ever spoken by all of humanity. And we're building supercomputers large enough to augment human intelligence. So this is not like, we're not going to talk about AI in 5 years any differently than we don't talk about internet companies anymore or mobile companies anymore. Augmented intelligence is going to be the very fabric of everything, of all businesses. If you are not leveraging the power of machines to help humans make better decisions today, right? I think about where ChatGPT is today, like it feels like it's a 10x improvement. But if you talk to Sam, or you talk to Reid Hoffman, or you talk to the folks at DeepMind, this is the beginning of the beginning. For the rest of your careers, this is what we're going to be investing against. This is the moment we've all waited for, because this is the moment that has maximum leverage for humanity, for all societies. So we live on a globe today where the average human conditions across the globe have never been better. Children surviving childbirth, length of lives lived, average GDP, per human on the planet, etc. And I think this is going to drive us all forward. Yes, there will be questions we have to answer, like purpose, productivity. If we can all do so much more with less, where will people derive purpose, right?
What happens to jobs? What happens to jobs? And we're already seeing that. You're talking about that. What happens to jobs if this really becomes real?
And I think I know Jake is talking about this on the pod. What I would say is, first, every wave of dislocation, starting with the Industrial Revolution, right? Moving from hunter-gatherer to agrarian to Industrial Revolution to information age, we've always panicked about what's going to happen to jobs. But to Jason's point, there's so much left to do. The bigger thing is the nature of the jobs to be done. Post-World War II, we had a lot of people who had to rebuild the planet in a very industrial, manufacturing intensive way. Most of those jobs will disappear. And so we're going to have different types of jobs. Jake, why don't you roll with it from there?
Well, the good news, I think, is if you embrace this technology in the first inning, baseball metaphor, kind of like this is year one of the App Store, is how to think about it. You're not too late, just because you don't work at OpenAI, you haven't been doing this for 5 years. This is kind of like Steve Jobs holds up the first iPhone, and then 6 months later, you release the App Store. That's kind of where we're at right now. So your timing is perfect if you use it. But I remember when I came into the industry, and I used to do network engineering, and I would set up computers and networks for companies in IT. There were some boomers who didn't want a PC on their desk. And they said, oh, give it to my secretary. Okay, well, your secretary has one, but you can have one too, and you have this Microsoft Office, and you can do all these spreadsheets and documents and like get email, or just print it out for me. Those people refuse to move on with the paradigm. And there's a saying in psychology about paradigms. Paradigms don't die, people do. So there'll be a group of people who do not embrace this technology, and they will die, and then all that will be left is people who do embrace it. The amazing thing is, 2 or 3 of the hardest jobs in the world, where we are the most constrained, are data science and developers and coders. With this new technology, does anybody here speak English? Raise your hand if you speak English. Everyone? Great, congratulations, you're all developers. You just don't know yet. In the coming months, I didn't say years, I said months, you will be talking to a computer and it'll be writing code for you, and you will be a developer. It's now, but how many people here are not developers that are writing code in ChatGPT? Okay, well, what did I suspect? So that's kind of the mind-blowing part. The idea of coding and programming is something other than English will seem silly in a couple of years. Of course, you just talk to the computer and tell it in English what you want. Why would you write code? Just like the idea that when I was coming up in the industry, we would open the computer up and we would put in a network interface card, a NIC card, and we would put in extra memory chips, and we take out the hard drive and put in a bigger one, and then you filled it up. Like, all of that got extracted away. And 19 departments didn't do that. It was in the cloud, you had more memory than you needed, and it all just worked. And then data science, I have the Chat GPT feature now. I don't know if anybody else is in the plugins or whatever, but you can upload a CSV file, any spreadsheet or whatever. And then you just tell me about this file. And it's like, well, it has these columns. And those are zip codes and the houses and prices and how many rooms there are and when it was sold. And then you say, what trends can you tell me about this? And it analyzes it and it tells you the trends. And then you say, can you put those in graphs? And it puts it in graphs. And I was giving a talk to one of the Rosewood Hotel groups over here. We had 150 executives, this was just last week, and I was showing them some of the stuff. And I said, is anybody here on the management team the data scientist? And they all pointed, like, Justin's the data scientist. And I showed it to Justin. And I looked at it and I said, how many of these requests do you have from other people in the room? It was like months. I was like, they could all do it themselves now. And everybody's like, oh, poor Justin. I said, no. Now Justin does not have to have an annoying conversation with you about the most basic data stuff. You can come to him with your questions that are now the questions he's asking. And he can have a really high-level discussion with you about your data.
Right.
We don't know what these things are going to be able to teach us. When we put them on these huge data sets, as Brad was saying before, data is the new oil. You guys have some experience with it? Oil, right? From data, like, so the metaphor, it's like massive amounts of value.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, and I think just being able to set up these auto GPTs, and the auto GPTs is really mind-blowing. You say to the GPT, you're a salesperson, you're selling this product, go ahead and every day look for new customers and send them a welcome email and ask them to book a demo. And you're going to set this persona loose, and you're just going to watch it work, and then say, if people tell you they're not interested, don't try to sell that person, and ask them if they know somebody else in the organization that you should talk to. And it's going to just learn every day how to sell. And then the salesperson is going to have like 5 salespeople working for them. They're all going to be digital. It's going to get weird, but it's going to be awesome.
What's going to happen to the
the folks at DeepMind, this is the beginning of the beginning. For the rest of your careers, this is what we're going to be investing against. This is the moment we've all waited for, because this is the moment that has maximum leverage for humanity, for all societies. So we live on a globe today where the average human conditions across the globe have never been better. Children surviving childbirth, length of lives lived, average GDP, per human on the planet, etc. And I think this is going to drive us all forward. Yes, there will be questions we have to answer, like purpose, productivity. If we can all do so much more with less, where will people derive purpose, right?
What happens to jobs? What happens to jobs? And we're already seeing that. You're talking about that. What happens to jobs if this really becomes real?
And I think I know Jake is talking about this on the pod. What I would say is, first, every wave of dislocation, starting with the Industrial Revolution, right? Moving from hunter-gatherer to agrarian to Industrial Revolution to information age, we've always panicked about what's going to happen to jobs. But to Jason's point, there's so much left to do. The bigger thing is the nature of the jobs to be done. Post-World War II, we had a lot of people who had to rebuild the planet in a very industrial, manufacturing intensive way. Most of those jobs will disappear. And so we're going to have different types of jobs. Jake, why don't you roll with it from there?
Well, the good news, I think, is if you embrace this technology in the first inning, baseball metaphor, kind of like this is year one of the App Store, is how to think about it. You're not too late, just because you don't work at OpenAI and you haven't been doing this for 5 years. This is kind of like Steve Jobs holds up the first iPhone, and then 6 months later, you release the App Store. That's kind of where we're at right now. So your timing is perfect if you use it. But I remember when I came into the industry,